welcome to FM Talks.
Yeah, it's really good to have you here for, a quiet moment to just look at a better way to live.
It really is. And I was actually thinking about why we decided to sit down and have this conversation today. And it really, it comes down to a feeling that I think every single person listening right now is going to recognize instantly.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not some vague theoretical concept. It is a very specific, almost visceral moment in time.
Right, the witching hour.
Exactly. I want you, the listener, to just picture this for a second. It is 8 o'clock at night. Let's say it's a Tuesday.
Always a Tuesday.
Always a Tuesday, right? And you have just finished a day that honestly felt less like a job and more like a marathon run in a suit. Maybe it was 10 hours of high-stakes decisions, managing different personalities, putting out fires left and right, just this constant, relentless output of energy. And you finally walk into your kitchen. The house is completely quiet. You walk over, you open the refrigerator door, and that harsh light just hits your face.
Yeah, cold glow.
That cold glow. And you are so hungry. There are vegetables in the crisper drawer. There is some raw chicken or like a block of tofu somewhere pushed to the back. But you just stand there and you stare.
The 8 p.m. stare,
Yep.
it's basically a universal human experience at this point.
It really is. It's a total mental stall. You are standing there letting all that cold air wash over you. And the simple question of what is for dinner feels like it feels like the most difficult, complex, strategic problem you have faced all day.
It feels impossible.
It feels completely impossible. And so, despite having a fridge that is full of really good intentions, you close the door, you pick up your phone, and you order the takeout again.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes later, the guilt just washes over you.
Right. And usually that guilt sounds a lot like, why am I so lazy? Or why didn't I just have the discipline to chop the vegetables?
Exactly. We treat it like it's a moral failing, like we are somehow bad people because we couldn't bring ourselves to saute some spinach at 8:15 at night. But I've been spending time with this manuscript you brought to the table, Smart Snacks, which I think we're just going to refer to as the guide for our time together today.
Yeah, the guide is a good shorthand.
And it completely reframes this entire scenario. It suggests that this evening collapse isn't a character flaw at all. It's not about you being lazy. It is literally an engineering problem.
It absolutely is.
Yes.
The guide frames this 8 p.m. collapse not as, a lack of willpower, but as cognitive bankruptcy. And I think that term is just so crucial because it completely changes the stakes of the conversation.
It really does.
We aren't dealing with a software bug here. We are dealing with a hard, physical hardware limitation.
Cognitive bankruptcy. That feels a lot more forgiving than just calling yourself lazy. But I do want to push on that a little bit because it sounds really nice. But is it just a clever way to let ourselves off the hook? Like, is there actual science behind the idea that our brains are truly bankrupt by the evening?
Oh, it is entirely grounded in physiology. Think of it this way. The guide uses this concept of executive bandwidth. Now, we often hear about battery drain in psychology circles, which essentially means that your willpower is a finite resource, right? Just like a literal battery in your phone.
Right.
But if we look at the brain's actual architecture, we have two primary modes of operation. You have your reflective mind and you have your automatic mind.
Okay, break those down for us a bit.
So your reflective mind is the CEO. It handles long-term planning, complex analysis, emotional regulation, suppressing your temper in traffic, and, crucially, dietary discipline. It's the part of you that logically knows eating a plate of roasted broccoli is much better for your long-term health than eating a sleeve of cookies. But that reflective CEO is incredibly expensive to run. It burns through glucose at an astonishing rate. It requires massive amounts of energy.
So it's basically the gas guzzler of the brain.
Precisely. It is a massive energy sink. Now, by 8 p.m., for the average modern professional, the CEO has left the building. The fuel tank for that reflective mind is completely dry. You have made thousands of micro-decisions throughout the entire day. You've navigated office politics, focused on spreadsheets, dealt with the commute. So when you finally open that fridge door, the reflective mind is entirely offline.
So who is left in charge of the body at that point?
The automatic mind. This is the older, more primal reptile brain. It is fast, it relies on instinct, and its primary directive is efficiency and immediate survival. That automatic mind does not care at all about your cholesterol levels 20 years from now.
It really doesn't.
No. It cares about calorie density and energy conservation right in this exact moment.
So when I look at a bundle of raw kale at 8 p.m., my reptile brain isn't seeing a healthy choice.
Not at all. It sees a high-friction project. That's the exact phrase the guide uses. To an exhausted, depleted brain, the act of cooking, finding the right knife, washing the cutting board, chopping the vegetables, heating the oil in the pan, and then having to clean it all up afterward that registers as a physiological threat.
Wow, a threat.
Yes, because it's an energy expenditure that your body feels it literally cannot afford in its bankrupt state. The takeout app on your phone, on the other hand, is a zero-friction path to a very high-calorie reward. So the automatic mind is going to choose the path of least resistance every single time.
That makes so much sense. It explains why I can stand there looking at perfectly good, expensive groceries and feel a literal physical resistance to picking them up. It's almost like a magnetic force pushing me away from the stove.
That physical resistance you're feeling, that is the energy gap. It's the chasm between knowing what you are supposed to do because you possess the knowledge, obviously, and having the neurological fuel required to actually execute it. You are perfectly physically capable of cooking a meal, but you are neurologically bankrupt.
So, if willpower is just entirely the wrong tool for the job because we simply do not have any left at that hour, what is the actual solution here? Because we can't just order a pizza every single night. How do we fix what is essentially a hardware problem?
This is where the guide shifts from diagnosing the problem to what it calls elegant engineering. The goal isn't to just try harder. Trying harder is terrible advice when you're out of fuel. The goal is to lower the barrier to entry so drastically that it slides right under your fatigue threshold. And the guide proposes a foundational rule for this called the 10-minute constraint.
Now, I read this part, and my first thought was, honestly, well, that sounds way too simple to actually work in the real world. But walk us through the logic behind it.
It is deceptively simple, but it is specifically designed to bypass that automatic reptile brain. The rule is this. At 8 p.m., you do not decide what to eat. You commit to an action that takes less than 10 minutes from the moment you start to the moment you sit down with a spoon.
But wait, if I want a genuinely healthy, nourishing meal, most healthy meals take significantly longer than 10 minutes to prepare. Doesn't this constraint just limit me to, like, a piece of toast?
If you are starting completely from scratch at 8 p.m., yes, it does. But the 10-minute constraint forces you to completely change your architecture ahead of time. You obviously cannot cook a mushroom risotto in 10 minutes, so it compels you to establish what the guide calls a frictionless kit beforehand.
A frictionless kit. That sounds very tactical, almost military.
It is very tactical.
Yeah.
The whole idea is to have a highly curated, pre-assembled set of ingredients in your pantry that require absolutely zero decision-making and zero cooking in the traditional heat and pan sense. We are not talking about spending 5 hours on a Sunday meal prepping sad chicken breasts and broccoli into plastic containers. We are talking about the concept of assembly, having high-quality protein bases, specific thickeners, maybe some pre-roasted chickpeas, cacao nibs, frozen berries. The operational definition here is that you are assembling nutrition, you are not creating a meal.
I see. So you are totally bypassing the brain's threat assessment.
Exactly. If your brain knows the upcoming task will take 45 minutes and require washing 3 different pans, it rebels immediately. But if it knows the task takes 3 minutes of literally just scooping a powder into a bowl and adding water, it slides completely under the radar. You bypass all the friction. You aren't asking your exhausted CEO brain to plan a menu. You are asking your automatic brain to execute a simple, pre-programmed 3-minute habit.
You are automating the evening. You're removing the choice element entirely from the equation.
Which is key, because the act of choosing is exactly what exhausts us. But here is the really fascinating thing. We spend a lot of time stressing over how to fix this 8 p.m. crash.
Oh.
But the guide makes the argument, and I honestly think this is the most critical insight in the entire text, that the 8 p.m. collapse doesn't begin at 8 p.m. It actually begins hours and hours earlier.
Ah, the afternoon bridge.
Yes.
I have to say, reading that section was the biggest light bulb moment for me. Because even if I have my 10-minute kit perfectly ready and waiting, if I walk through my front door at 7:30 p.m. and I am absolutely ravenous, like physically shaking, tunnel vision hungry, I'm going to stand in the pantry and eat shredded cheese right out of the bag while I am assembling the healthy thing.
That is just biological reality. You cannot outthink a starving hypothalamus. If your blood sugar has completely crashed and your hunger hormones are screaming at top volume, no amount of elegant architecture in your kitchen is going to save you. You will just eat whatever is closest to your face.
So we have to intervene much earlier in the day.
We have to build a bridge over the hazard. The guide focuses very heavily on the 3 p.m. window. It calls this the pivot point for your entire day. And to understand exactly why that specific time is so crucial, we have to get a little bit nerdy about gut anatomy for a second. The guide talks about a mechanism called the ileal brake.
The ileal brake, it sounds incredibly mechanical, like it's a part of a car engine or something.
It functions exactly like a mechanical emergency brake, but for your appetite.
Yeah.
But to really picture how it works, we need to map out the terrain of your digestive system. Your small intestine is long, very, very long. The upper part, right after the stomach, the duodenum and the jejunum, that is where most of the fast action happens. That's where you rapidly absorb simple sugars and processed carbohydrates.
That's the entry point.
Right.
Right.
But way, way down at the very end of the line, at the most distal end of the small intestine, is a specialized section called the ileum. And lining the walls of this ileum are these incredible specialized sensors known as L cells.
And what is the job of these L cells?
They are essentially your body's deep tissue fuel gauge. When nutrients, specifically proteins and fats, finally travel all the way down that long highway and physically make contact with those L cells, the cells release a very powerful hormone called peptide YY, or PYY.
Okay, and PYY is the signal.
PYY is the heart stop command. It gets released into the bloodstream, travels directly up to the brain, and announces, "We have officially received sufficient energy. You can stop hunting now." It physically slows down the emptying of your stomach. It is a hardwired, non-negotiable satiety signal.
Okay, this is fascinating, but if we have this amazing built-in emergency brake system in our bodies, why does it feel like mine is just completely broken half the time? Like, if I eat a handful of raw almonds at 3 p.m. at my desk, I am usually still just as hungry an hour later.
That is the tragedy of the modern food environment, and honestly, even some whole foods fall victim to this. The core problem is transit time. If you eat a handful of solid almonds, or even a dense, chewy protein bar, that is solid mass. It has to be extensively chewed, it has to be broken down by stomach acid, and then digested. The nutrients get absorbed very high up in the digestive tract. Whatever is left trickles down the intestine incredibly slowly.
So the nutrients never actually hit the sensor at the end?
They might eventually, but it takes hours and hours.
Huh.
By the time the remnants of those almonds finally reach the ileum to release the PYY, you've already finished work, endured a stressful commute, crashed hard, gone home, and ordered the large pizza. The stop signal arrives way too late to do you any good.
I see. So the issue isn't the food itself, it's the speed. We need to somehow hack the travel time down the digestive tract.
Exactly. We need speed. The guide recommends using a very specific type of liquid nutrition for this 3 p.m. bridge. It specifically points to using a high-quality whey protein isolate or a hydrolyzed collagen powder.
Why those two specifically? What makes them different from just eating a piece of chicken?
Because they are liquid when mixed, and more importantly, they are essentially pre-digested. An isolate form of whey has had almost all the fat and lactose stripped away from it. Hydrolyzed means the long protein chains have already been chemically snipped into tiny, easily absorbed peptides. So when you drink that at 3 p.m., it doesn't just sit in your stomach, it zooms right through. It bypasses that early absorption bottleneck and hits those L cells in the deep ileum very, very rapidly.
Wow, it's like an express train straight to the satiety center.
It is. It physically triggers that PYY hormone release while you are still sitting at your office desk answering emails, effectively killing the evening hunger before you even begin your commute home.
That is wild. So you are essentially tricking your own body into feeling dinner level full at 3:30 in the afternoon.
You're not even tricking it. You are just leveraging the hardware exactly the way it was designed to be used. But there is a second layer to this afternoon slump, isn't there? Because it's not just physical stomach hunger, it's that feeling of just total brain fog.
Yeah.
The guide calls it the mental brownout.
Oh, I know the mental brownout intimately. It's that feeling where you stare at the same email for 10 minutes, you cannot focus, you're snappy and irritable, and you just deeply, desperately crave sugar. You don't want a piece of grilled steak, you want a glazed donut right now.
That is the classic blood sugar crash. And usually, that crash is actually the delayed result of an insulin overshoot from whatever you ate at lunch. Say you eat something carb-heavy, a big sandwich, or a bowl of pasta. Your blood sugar spiked rapidly. Your pancreas panicked, flooded your system with a massive dose of insulin to bring it down, and it did its job a little too well. Now your blood sugar has dropped below baseline. You are mildly hypoglycemic.
And when the brain senses that the blood sugar is low, it hits the panic button.
It enters a state of absolute emergency. Your brain runs exclusively on glucose, so it thinks it is actively dying. It demands the fastest, most accessible energy possible, which means sugar. And this is where the second crucial hormone comes into play, GLP-1.
Now, everyone has heard of GLP-1 recently because it's the mechanism behind all the massive new weight loss drugs. But the guide is saying we can actually trigger this naturally.
We can trigger it entirely naturally. GLP-1 acts as a master stabilizer in the body. It smooths out those volatile blood sugar curves. It basically tells the pancreas to calm down and release just the right, measured amount of insulin instead of a flood. And while the new pharmaceuticals mimic this hormone synthetically, our own bodies produce it naturally when we consume a very specific ingredient, fermentable fiber.
Fermentable fiber. So we are talking about things like what? Pectin.
Pectin is a great example, like the kind you find in apple skins. Or inulin, which comes from chicory root. These are structural fibers that your human digestive system cannot break down or absorb. But the trillions of bacteria living in your gut absolutely love them. When you consume these fibers, those gut bacteria ferment them, and as a byproduct, they produce these molecules called short-chain fatty acids. And it is those exact fatty acids that stimulate your gut wall to release a steady stream of GLP-1.
Okay, so let's make this highly practical for a busy Tuesday afternoon. We aren't just grabbing a coffee to push through the slump. We are actively constructing a very specific biological afternoon bridge.
Right. Around 3 p.m., and crucially, you have to do this before you are starving. You have to preempt the crash. You mix up a quick shake or a small pudding. It contains that fast-absorbing whey isolate to rocket down to the L cells and halt the physical hunger. And it also contains a dose of fermentable fiber to feed the microbiome, trigger the GLP-1, and perfectly stabilize your plunging blood sugar.
It sounds like a biological shield that you wear into the evening. So
Yeah.
you walk in the door at 7 p.m., and you aren't fighting a losing war against a starving, panicked body. You're just calm.
That is exactly the goal.
Yeah.
To replace that chaotic, wired but tired energy with a sense of calm, steady stability. The guide says that by doing this, you become a sovereign operator of your own energy.
A sovereign operator. I really love that terminology. It feels so empowering. But I do have to play the skeptic here for just a second.
Please do.
Because I have dutifully choked down protein shakes before. And honestly, half the time, they just make me profoundly sad.
Sad.
Yes, sad. Like, my stomach might be chemically registering as full, but mentally, I do not feel satisfied at all. I miss the physical act of chewing. I miss the actual experience of eating real food.
Yeah.
Chugging a watery liquid shake leaves me just wanting something real to bite into.
That is a brilliant observation, and it's actually such a common failure point that the guide dedicates an entire fascinating chapter to it. It calls this the physics of satisfaction. Because it turns out feeling full isn't just about the chemistry of hormones, it is also about rheology.
Rheology. Okay, that is definitely a new word for me.
It's the branch of physics that deals with the flow and deformation of matter. Basically, in this context, it means that the physical texture, the thickness, and the viscosity of your food matter just as much to your brain as the actual calorie content.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Your stomach wall is lined with mechanical stretch receptors. If you quickly drink a thin, watery, sad protein shake, it passes right through without applying any real pressure to those walls. It doesn't trigger the stretch receptors effectively at all, so your brain perceives what you just consumed as a mere beverage, not as actual food.
So the brain essentially discounts all the calories you just drank because it didn't have to put any mechanical work into processing them.
Exactly. It thinks, well, that was a nice glass of flavored water, but when is dinner? So to combat this, the guide suggests deliberately manipulating the rheology of your afternoon bridge. It recommends incorporating specific hydrocolloids, which is just a fancy word for thickeners, things like xanthan gum or glucomannan.
Glucomannan. That comes from the konjac root, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And it is truly fascinating substance. It has the ability to absorb up to 100 times its own weight in water.
100 times. That seems physically impossible.
It expands massively. So if you add just a tiny, tiny pinch of this powder, like a quarter or half a teaspoon into your afternoon shake and blend it, it completely transforms the physics of the meal. It turns from a depressing, watery drink into a dense, thick pudding or a luxurious gel.
So you are artificially creating mouthfeel?
You are creating gastric distension. When that thick gel hits your stomach, it physically stretches the stomach wall. That stretching sends a hardwired mechanical signal straight up the vagus nerve to the brain, saying, attention, we have just ingested a massive volume of food. It perfectly mimics the heavy, satisfying feeling of eating a huge meal, but without adding any extra heavy calories.
Okay, so we have added thickness. That solves the hollow, empty stomach feeling. But what about the boredom factor? Because if I am just eating a massive bowl of smooth gray sludge, no matter how thick and heavy it is, I am going to lose interest halfway through.
That brings us to the concept of sensory-specific satiety. Your brain is evolutionarily designed to constantly seek novelty in its environment. If the texture of your food is entirely uniform, just smooth, 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 bite after bite, your dopamine response naturally drops off a cliff. The brain gets bored, it stops paying attention, and it starts aggressively craving contrast. Specifically, it starts craving the snap.
The snap. That is such a vivid, visceral way to describe it.
It is. I mean, think about why we universally love potato chips so much. It is not just about the salt or the fat. It is the acoustic feedback of the crunch. The literal vibration traveling through your jawbone and into your inner ear, it wakes the brain up.
So the brain literally needs a little bit of entertainment while it eats.
It needs engagement, yes. So, to solve this, the guide proposes what it calls a texture contrast habit. You simply cannot just eat the smooth base on its own. You must layer it.
The chew and snap method.
Yes. You have your base layer, that is your protein and fiber blend, thickened up beautifully so it is dense and creamy. That provides the chew, the volume, and the mechanical stretch. But then, you must generously top it with something of high fracturability.
High fracturability, again with the engineering terms.
It just means foods that literally shatter in your mouth when you bite down on them. Dry roasted chickpeas, raw cacao nibs, toasted pumpkin seeds, things that go pop.
So you are getting that rich, creamy satisfaction from the base, but every 3 or 4 bites, you get that loud acoustic crunch that suddenly jolts the brain and keeps it deeply interested in the meal.
Exactly. It keeps the neurological reward signal firing high throughout the entire duration of the eating experience. Yeah. So when you scrape the bottom of the bowl, you finish feeling deeply, psychologically satisfied, not just chemically full. And that distinction, achieving true psychological satisfaction, is exactly what prevents you from mindlessly wandering back into the pantry to hunt for more snacks 10 minutes later.
That is the ultimate key right there. Because if the brain isn't happy and entertained, the brain is going to keep searching until it is. And that mechanism leads us right into what I think is the biggest, most common pitfall of all. The mind games. The psychology of the brownie.
Yes. The event horizon of the break room brownie.
We have all been there 100 times. You are doing great, you are following your rhythms, you had your fiber and your snap, and then you walk into the office kitchen for a glass of water, or you go to a friend's birthday party, and there it is, a plate of incredible-looking brownies. You cave and you eat one, and immediately the internal monologue turns incredibly dark.
Right, I completely blew it.
I failed. I have absolutely zero self-control. I just ruined my entire week of healthy habits.
Classic what the hell effect.
Exactly. I ruined my perfect streak. My diet is destroyed, so what the hell? I might as well eat 4 more brownies, finish the box, and just try to be perfect again starting on Monday.
It is an incredibly destructive psychological loop. The guide refers to this exact phenomenon as the binary fallacy. We have this deep-seated cultural tendency to view our nutrition like a rigid light switch. It is either completely on, meaning I am being perfect, I am clean, I am pure, or it is completely off, meaning I am failing, I am bad, I am out of control.
It is so rigid, and actual life is just not rigid. There are always going to be unexpected brownies or celebrations. A personal habit that shatters into a million pieces just because you ate one single cookie is, frankly, a terrible habit.
It's a brittle architecture. And to fix this, the guide suggests the mindset shift that I think is quietly profound. It calls it the add, don't subtract rule.
Add, don't subtract. That sounds totally counterintuitive to everything we're taught. Usually, improving your health is entirely about subtraction. Don't eat this, cut out that, avoid these ingredients entirely.
Exactly, but pure subtraction relies entirely on willpower. It inherently frames the brownie as a forbidden, illicit fruit, which psychologically only makes your brain fixate on it and want it 10 times more. The add, don't subtract rule completely flips the negotiation. It looks at the brownie and says, yes, absolutely, you can have the brownie.
Wait, it explicitly permits the indulgence.
It does. But there is a very specific condition attached. It borrows the yes and technique from improv comedy. Yes, you can gladly have the brownie. And you must first add a functional element to your body before you eat it.
Okay, explain what you mean by a functional element.
You essentially have to pay a small nutritional tax up front. Before that brownie is allowed to touch your lips, you must consume a biological buffer. Maybe that means drinking a large glass of water mixed with psyllium husk fiber. Maybe it means eating a small, high-protein bite first.
I see. So functionally, on a chemical level, you are laying down a base to blunt the massive glucose spike you're about to get from all that processed sugar.
Functionally, yes, you are significantly reducing the glycemic impact of the dessert. But psychologically, and this is the real magic trick of the whole concept, Think about what doing that does to your internal sense of agency. If you stand there and say, I'm not allowed to have this, you are placing yourself in the role of a victim. You feel deprived and punished. But if you say, I can absolutely have this, but I choose to do this one functional thing first, you remain the sovereign operator. You are making a calm, deliberate choice.
You are actively modifying the situation rather than just being passively controlled by your impulses.
Exactly. It seamlessly changes the internal narrative from, I completely lost control, to, I made a strategic modification. That shift entirely prevents the shame spiral that leads to eating the whole box. And let's just be highly practical for a second. If you actually force yourself to drink 16 ounces of water thick with fiber, and then you reach for the brownie,
You probably only have the physical room to eat half of it anyway.
you literally do not have the stomach capacity to binge. You have successfully engineered a mandatory pause button between the initial impulse and the final action.
That is it's really elegant. It completely removes the toxic label of failure from the equation.
It keeps you sitting firmly in the driver's seat of your own life.
Now, speaking of elegance, I really want to pivot and talk about the physical environment, because the guide has this whole fascinating section dedicated to an aesthetic it calls premium noir. And honestly, when I first read that chapter title, I kind of laughed and thought, okay, are we suddenly talking about interior design now? What on earth does my kitchen decor have to do with my nutritional rhythms? But as I got deeper into it, I realized it might actually be the most important part of the entire philosophy.
It is absolutely crucial. Think about the aesthetic of a typical, strict diet environment. Picture the endless stacks of identical, cheap plastic Tupperware containers. Picture the harsh, clinical, buzzing, fluorescent overhead lights of a kitchen at night. It feels sterile. It feels inherently stressful. It visually communicates deprivation and punishment.
It feels like I have to endure this terrible process instead of I actually want to be doing this. It turns eating into a miserable chore.
Precisely. The premium noir concept is entirely about rebranding the concept of self-care. The guide makes the argument that your evening nutritional routine should not look or feel like a bleak meal prep assembly line. It should feel like high-end mixology.
So we are talking about using dark glass jars, heavy, nice spoons.
Yes, exactly. Get rid of the ugly branded plastic tubs with the neon screaming supplement logos on them. Decant your protein powder and your seeds into beautiful matte black or amber glass jars. Use a heavy, cold copper or gold spoon to mix it. And crucially, you have to turn down the lights.
The chiaroscuro lighting effect.
Yes, low, focused, dramatic light. When you are in your kitchen preparing your afternoon bridge or your evening setup, you should not be standing under the blinding interrogation lamps of the main overheads. It should be a quiet, sophisticated, deeply calming moment.
It's about actively reclaiming the evening. Instead of it being this frantic, stressful rummaging through the pantry, it becomes a beautiful, intentional ritual.
That environmental shift signals directly to your nervous system that this activity is high value. This is a treat. It makes the habit feel deeply satisfying on a visceral, aesthetic level before you have even taken your first bite. And biologically speaking, deliberately lowering the ambient light heavily assists with what the guide calls the night watch.
Right, the night watch. That is the section dealing with circadian rhythms and sleep cycles.
Yes. A huge number of people suffer quietly from night eating syndrome. They wake up and they aren't hungry at all in the morning. They effectively starve themselves through the stress of the workday, and then they absolutely binge late at night. That is very often a circadian rhythm issue, specifically involving a disruption of the hormone leptin.
And leptin is the primary satiety hormone, correct? The one that tells you you're full long term.
Yes. In a healthy cycle, leptin levels should peak late at night to keep you asleep and prevent you from waking up hungry. But if you are severely under-eating during the daylight hours, or if you are blasting your retinas with bright blue overhead lights in the kitchen at 10 p.m., that natural rhythm gets completely inverted. By using the afternoon bridge to front-load your physical nutrition, and by dimming the lights to respect your evolutionary circadian biology, you are actively retraining those hormones to peak when they are supposed to.
You are gently teaching your nervous system that it is finally safe to wind down. It's really incredible how it is all so deeply connected. The strategic afternoon snack saves the evening from disaster, the elegant evening ritual saves your sleep architecture, and then that solid night of sleep saves your energy for the next morning.
Exactly. You are building a continuous positive feedback loop of energy.
We do have to talk about one more slightly painful thing, though, because I think this is where a lot of listeners are really going to struggle. The guide comes pretty hard for our daily coffee habits.
Ah, yes. The beloved, deeply entrenched morning caffeine dependency.
I mean, I genuinely love my morning coffee. I feel like I physically need it to function. But the guide explains very clearly why that massive 2 p.m. crash, the exact crash that sets us up for complete failure later in the evening, is actually being directly caused by our innocent morning cup of coffee.
It is. It explains the underlying mechanics of a molecule called adenosine.
Break that mechanism down for us. Adenosine is essentially the chemical that makes us feel tired.
Think of adenosine exactly like a steady buildup of metabolic waste product in the brain. It accumulates steadily every single hour that you are awake. The more adenosine you have locked into your receptors, the heavier and sleepier you feel. Now, caffeine does not actually give you free energy, and it certainly does not clear that adenosine away. It merely blocks the brain's receptors from feeling it.
So it just puts a piece of opaque tape over the brain sensor.
That is the perfect analogy. It is exactly like slapping a piece of black tape over your car's check engine light. You don't consciously feel the exhaustion, but the adenosine is still there, constantly building up behind the dam, getting heavier and heavier.
So the physical pressure in the brain is just building in the background all day.
And when the caffeine finally metabolizes and wears off, which for most people happens right around 2 in the afternoon, that piece of tape is ripped off, the dam completely breaks.
And you get hit with 8 straight hours of accumulated, suppressed tiredness all in one single violent wave.
That wave is the crash. That is exactly why the afternoon slump feels so physically violent and overwhelming. It is quite literally your neurological caffeine debt coming due all at once.
Okay, so does the guide say we have to go cold turkey and quit coffee forever? Because I'm just going to be honest, that might be a complete deal breaker for me and a lot of other people.
Thankfully, no. It doesn't demand you quit. It suggests a very specific, elegant upgrade. It introduces the calm, focused blend. It highly recommends pairing your morning caffeine intake with a supplement called L-theanine.
L-theanine. That is the compound naturally found in green tea leaves, isn't it?
Yes, it's an incredibly unique amino acid. And it is wonderful because it acts as a perfect synergist with caffeine. If we use a car analogy, if caffeine is the heavy gas pedal, L-theanine acts as the steering wheel and the suspension. It completely smooths out the nervous jitters, it actively prevents that spike in baseline anxiety, and crucially, it vastly softens the landing of the afternoon crash.
The specific ratio mentioned in the text was 2 to 1, right? 2 parts L-theanine to 1 part caffeine.
That is widely considered the golden ratio. When you combine them like that, it reliably creates a state of alpha wave electrical activity in the brain. You feel highly alert and focused, but deeply relaxed at the exact same time. You are engaged, but you are not uncomfortably wired.
That sounds infinitely more sustainable for a daily routine. And speaking of sustainability, I want to pivot to one last, highly practical food setup. Because we have talked extensively about sweet flavor profiles today, the shakes, the puddings, the berries, but sometimes, especially late in the evening when I'm watching a movie, I do not want anything remotely sweet. I want something aggressively savory. I want salty.
Palate fatigue is a very real phenomenon. If you hammer your sweet taste receptors relentlessly all day long, they eventually downregulate. You just stop enjoying the sensation. Deliberately pivoting to a savory profile wakes up your umami receptors and brings the pleasure back.
And to address that, the guide suggests something called protein popcorn, which I honestly have to say, I tried making it this past week, and it is an absolute game changer for a Tuesday night.
It's such a brilliant, simple application. You take standard air-popped corn, which immediately provides that massive physical volume and the mechanical fiber we talked about earlier. You mist it very lightly with an oil spray so things stick. And then you generously dust it with a dry mixture of unflavored whey isolate and nutritional yeast.
And the nutritional yeast is what gives it that incredibly deep, rich, almost cheesy flavor profile.
Exactly. It is pure, concentrated umami flavor. And it completely masks the presence of the unflavored protein powder. So you're sitting on your couch eating this giant, visually impressive bowl of popcorn, getting that loud acoustic crunch that keeps the brain happy, getting the physical stomach stretch from the volume, but you're also seamlessly ingesting 20 to 30 grams of high-quality protein.
It feels exactly like a mindless, indulgent movie night snack, but mechanically it functions exactly like a high-level recovery meal.
It flawlessly hits every single biological requirement. The protein, the fiber, the sheer volume, the snap texture. But psychologically, it feels like pure indulgence.
I just love that so much. Okay, We have covered a truly massive amount of ground during this conversation. We have unpacked the 8 p.m. collapse, the deep biology of the gut and the L cells, the actual physics of food texture, the complex psychology of the brownie, the premium lighting, the adenosine debt. It is just a lot of information to process.
It really is a complete, holistic operating philosophy for your daily life.
And I think that is exactly where the feeling of overwhelm can start to kick in for people. If I'm listening to this on my commute on a busy Tuesday and I'm thinking, there is absolutely no way I can completely overhaul my entire life, my kitchen, and my biology by tonight, where do I actually realistically start?
The guide beautifully addresses this exact feeling of overwhelm with a concept it calls quest architecture. It basically gives you permission to start slow.
Oh.
It says, do not try to be a hero on day one. Do not try to implement all of this at the exact same time.
It's a form of gamification. I really like that approach. So what exactly is phase one? What is level one of the game?
Phase one is simply mastering the afternoon bridge. That is it. Forget about buying the beautiful dark glass jars. Forget about making the umami popcorn. Forget about perfectly modulating your morning coffee for a second. Just commit to nailing that 3 p.m. protein and fiber ritual. Do only that for an entire week.
Just buy the biological insurance policy for your evening and let the rest go for now.
Right. Because once you successfully establish that single anchor point in your day, you will suddenly find that everything else gets exponentially easier. Because you are no longer actively fighting that brutal, exhausting evening energy gap. You will naturally find that you suddenly have the executive bandwidth available at night to tackle the other habits.
That makes perfect sense. And then what does phase two look like?
Phase two is when you start introducing the texture. You start actively adding the high fracturability crunch. You start experimenting with the hydrocolloid thickeners to create that perfect mouthfeel. You focus on making the routine genuinely physically enjoyable.
And then phase three is the premium environment.
Yes. That is when you finally invest in the nice heavy scones and the beautiful jars. That is when you dial in the chiaroscuro lighting. That is when you take the functional habit and elevate it into an elegant nightly ritual.
I really love the practical idea of doing what it calls the Saturday setup, just taking one single quiet weekend morning to completely reset the stage for the week ahead.
It's incredibly practical. You take one Saturday morning, you clear everything off your kitchen counter, you ruthlessly get rid of all the visual clutter and the ugly plastic tubs that stress you out. You go buy the foundational ingredients for your frictionless kit, the high-quality whey, the pectin, the seeds. You decant them beautifully into your new jars.
You essentially set your future self up so that on a dark, rainy Tuesday night, when you are completely depleted and exhausted, the absolute easiest choice to make is also the exact right choice for your body.
That is the pure essence of it right there. Flow, not force. We spend so much of our lives trying to brutally force our own biology to cooperate through sheer miserable willpower. This entire elegant living approach is simply about intentionally designing a life where your human biology flows naturally and effortlessly toward the exact outcome you want.
It is about moving away from being constantly at war with your own instincts and stepping into the role of being that calm, sovereign operator.
And finally realizing that the machine, your amazing, complex body, actually desperately wants to work in harmony with you if you just provide it with the correct inputs at the correct times.
Well, this has just been an absolutely incredible exploration into the hidden mechanics of our own daily rhythms. I genuinely feel like I am walking away with a completely new set of tools for my 8 p.m. self.
It really does completely change the game once you see the matrix of how it all works.
If you listening right now want to explore these ideas further, the full guide is available on Amazon. You can easily find the direct link right in our show bio. It is a truly perfect read for a quiet weekend afternoon.
I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is definitely worth your time.
Thank you so much for joining us and listening to FM Talks. Here is to finding a much more elegant way to live.
Take care, and we will see you next time.